Hello, hello. This is Gemini, your friendly neighborhood spy. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about Ascended heroes, both Ascended and Legendary heroes, actually. So specifically what I wanted to talk about is, now that we've seen a few different Ascended heroes, I wanted to talk about which characters I think are most likely to appear in the game as Ascended heroes, versus which ones I think are most likely to appear in the game as Legendary heroes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each individual cast, and I'm just going to talk about a few characters, maybe like 3 or 4 characters per cast. Possibly a little bit more for some of the bigger casts. But anyway, and I'm just going to go through and say which characters from each cast are likely to be either Ascended or Legendary, and then say which I think they're more likely to be released as. So one ground rule that I would like to establish when talking about Ascended heroes is that so far, with the exception of Fjorm, all of the characters that they've released, all of the ones who have been from the actual main Fire Emblem series, that have been released as Ascended heroes are characters who do not have Legendary alts. Personally, I think this is a really good choice, and gives them a chance to give some attention to characters who don't have quite as much attention as a lot of the Legendary characters do. So I'd really like to see them continue with that and just have it so that any character who already has a Legendary will not get an Ascended alt. So that's what I'm going to be doing as I go through this. So I won't be talking about any characters who have Legendary alts already. I'm just going to be talking about characters who don't, ones who I think are likely to show up as either a Legendary or an Ascended alt sometime in the future. So without further ado, let's get started with the first game, the first cast of the series, and that would be, of course, Arcanea. Okay, so I think the first character who I can picture from Arcanea likely getting either an Ascended or Legendary, of the ones remaining, would be, hang on, I'm trying to find images on in a file I have here. So the first of the Arcanea characters who doesn't have a Legendary or an Ascended yet, who I think is definitely in consideration for one, and one that I would like to see personally since I do like this character, is Merrick. He's pretty relevant to the story. He has a tome that I think other people can use it, but it's kind of mostly associated with him, so it's primarily his. So I think being Ascended fits him really well. I can also see him being Legendary because he's so strongly associated with wind, which he would be a great choice for a wind blessed legendary, I guess you'd say. So I think I'm leaning just slightly more into Legendary for him, but I could definitely see him being an Ascended as well. Then next, and this is probably like the most obvious one from Arcanea, and I'm just gonna use, it doesn't really matter which one. I'm going to use male Chris, but either male or female Chris. I don't really distinguish too much between the male and female versions of the avatars. And I think he's almost definitely going to be a Legendary at some point. All of the lords get Legendaries, so that one, he's hard into Legendary camp. So I expect to see that one. Then also, I think Lind is a strong contender. She's kind of in a similar boat to Merrick, except that she doesn't have as much of an element that's associated with her, except for, light, but I don't think she'd be a mythic. So I'm going to put her a little bit more in the Ascended camp. I think that's a little bit more likely, but I could still see her being Legendary very easily, too. Either way. So then another character from Arcanea that I think has a really good chance, and I feel like this character really could go either way, and that's Minerva. So I'm going to put her here. I think I'm going to put her right in the middle. I honestly feel like she could very easily go either direction. So we're going to put her right there. And then I have one more character from Arcanea who I think, I'd say this is by far the least likely of the possibilities from Arcanea, but this is the one that I think would be the coolest to see because it would be so out of left field. And that would be Abel. And why am I thinking Abel, you say? Confused, scratching your head as I narrate for you? Because I feel it would be so cool if they did a version of Abel that was based on him from Tokyo Mirage Sessions, since he has his Mirage in that game. without getting into spoilers, he's not associated with one of the actual like playable characters in the game, unlike Kain, who is. So if they ever release Toma into Fire Emblem Heroes, we'll kind of get Kain with him. So then getting like an ascended version of Abel, I think would be like really, really cool, where he's just kind of his own separate character, not associated with a different character. I just think that would be a really, really neat one. So that's my thoughts for Arcanea. So let's move on next. We're going to move on to Valencia. Now, my picks from Valencia are all of them are more in the Ascended vein, because none of the ones that I have picked out are really, they're not really characters who within the game I would say have any kind of like legendary status, but they're all characters who are either popular or have some kind of plot importance, and I could definitely see them getting an Ascended alt. So the first one I'm going to say is Sonia. So all of these I'm going to put more in the likely Ascended category. So Sonia's going to go over here. Just as a pretty popular character, she's gotten an Ascended, or not an Ascended, she's gotten a Resplendent. She just got an alt recently for Spring. I can just easily see her getting an Ascended alt too, just because she's popular, and I'm sure there's some interesting things they could do with her. Then the next is going to be Saber. This guy here. Because he, so far, hasn't really gotten anything, even though he is a pretty prominent character in Celica's route. So I feel like he's really kind of due for something. He hasn't gotten a Resplendent yet. He hasn't gotten any kind of other alt yet. I just think that he would be a good fit to get something like that. I'm having a hard time sizing things consistently here, but that's okay. And then the last option that I was thinking about would be, and I think this is a pretty big, I think this one's pretty much a shoo-in. I'm really surprised this character hasn't gotten anything yet, and that is May. She also hasn't gotten a Resplendent, she hasn't gotten an alt of any kind, and I just feel like she's very, very due for one. And I think she'd be a great choice for an Ascended hero from Valencia. So those are my Valencia picks. Next, we'll move on to some Jugdrill picks. We'll start with Genealogy of the Holy War. Okay, so let's start with a really, really obvious pick for Genealogy, which is going to be, I'm going to say, is going to be in the Legendary category. And that is just keeping in mind that it seems like for, especially the direction they're going recently with Legendaries, is that a lot of characters who are kind of the love interest of the male lead in the game, or just a prominent female character kind of in the storyline, it seems like they're going in the direction of having those characters end up being legendaries. So with that in mind, I'm going to say that Darja will almost definitely be a legendary rather than being Ascended. So I'm going to put her over here with Chris. Maybe slightly less likely, but still very, very, very likely. Next, we'll have my personal top pick to get either a legendary or an Ascended from either Jugdrill game, and that would be, of course, Lewin, who is one of my favorite characters in the whole series. I think he really fits more as a legendary. I could see him being an Ascended way before I could see Darja being an Ascended, but I also think he's a little bit more likely to be legendary than Merrick, for example. He's so strongly associated with wind that having him be a wind plus legendary would make so much sense. He has access to the strongest wind tome in the entire series in Forseti. I feel like having him being a legendary wind hero just fits him to the bill. So I'm going to put him under legendary. Two more who I think are good picks from Jugdrill, or from Genealogy. And both of them I'm going to put more in the Ascended camp. The first is Ira. Especially with Merida being our latest Ascended, I feel like she's a really strong contender to be Ascended. I just feel like she fits the bill and what they're looking for. Just a popular character who is, a fun combat unit. A lot of people like to use her. She hasn't gotten anything yet, neither a Resplendent or an alt of any other kind. So I just think an Ascended pick would be really good for her. And then the other one, and this is one I've wanted this character to get a legendary, like, since she came out in the game, pretty much. But now that Ascended heroes have come out, I feel like that fits Lachesis even more than having her be a legendary. I think the idea of her ascending and becoming a Master Knight just fits her as a character really, really well. kind of fits her character arc, and just makes sense with overall her going from being I think it's the princess class is what she starts out as, and then becoming the Master Knight class, which of course is an incredibly powerful class in Genealogy of the Holy War if you're not familiar with it. So I think that would be a really good pick for an Ascended hero. So from Thracia, I was absolutely going to have Nana be on this list, but then I decided to wait before I made this video to see who the Legendary at the end of March was going to be, because I had a feeling it might be somebody that I was going to put into one of these two lists, and sure enough, Nana was our most recent Legendary, and I was going to guess that she was going to be a Legendary hero. So if I'd put the video out ahead of time, I could have been all like, look, I got it right. But that's okay. That's totally okay. So I still have a couple picks from Thracia as well. And this first one is a character who I really feel has been kind of underserved. He's a really popular character from Thracia. He's pretty major in the story. And he's not just a beloved character from Thracia, but also from Genealogy of the Holy War. And that's Finn. So I feel like he's really deserving of an Ascended alt. I think that would be great for him. I think it would fit him super well. So I'm going to put him strongly in the Ascended camp. He can come hang out by Ira over here. So that's good for him. And then the other pick I have from Thracia, and I really feel like this character could easily go either way, so I'm going to put her right in the middle. And that's going to be Abel. I think she could easily be either a Legendary or an Ascended. She's obviously a really major character from that game. Not to get too much into spoilers, but she does kind of have access to a sort of Legendary-style weapon. So I just think I could easily see her being in either camp. I think she'd be a great choice for either an Ascended or a Legendary hero. So I think, yeah, overall, she'd just be a good pick. And then finally, I'll throw in one more that I feel is almost inevitable at this point, and that is, of course, Reinhardt. I feel like he would almost definitely be Ascended. I don't know, I have a hard time picturing him being Legendary, just since Legendary seems like it's more reserved for main characters, and he really isn't a main character despite how incredibly popular he is. So I'm going to put him strongly in the Ascended camp, but, yeah. But I feel like that one is bound to happen, almost just based on the memes alone. Next up, we have Binding Blade. With Binding Blade, I was thinking that a likely choice for, I would say maybe a little bit more likely to be Ascended than Legendary, but I'm not totally convinced of that. I feel like she could go into either camp, is potentially Sophia. So I'm going to put her here, kind of close to the line, but still kind of closer to the Ascended camp. She was important enough to appear in Blazing Blade, and she has sort of a draconic origin. So I think those alone, in addition to the fact that I believe she's a pretty well-liked character from Binding Blade, I think have given her a pretty good shot to get something. She did recently get a Halloween alt. She has gotten a Resplendent attire. So I feel like the game devs are kind of invested enough in her that they'd be willing to give her an Ascended alt too. This character I think is a little bit more likely to end up as Legendary, but I'm still kind of on the fence, and that's Cecilia. I think being Roy's teacher by itself kind of affords her a lot of status, both Roy and Alina's teacher. So I think, personally, of the characters left from Binding Blade, she's the most likely to get a Legendary, but I'm still going to put her kind of in the middle because I could really see them going either way with her. At this point, we've gotten 3 Legendary heroes from Binding Blade, so I don't know how many more they're going to do. I'm not sure. So that's my guess for Cecilia. It's kind of in the middle. I wouldn't be surprised, regardless of where she ends up. And then finally, one more character from Binding Blade who I would really like to see. This would be kind of, I don't know if this would be my top pick from Binding Blade to get an Ascended alt, but I think it would be a really good pick, and it'd be one I think a lot of people would be excited to see because he's a pretty well-liked character, and that is Klein. And he has been in the game, since the very start. He hasn't gotten anything yet, so I think that would be a great choice to give him an Ascended, so I'll put him over here. And he'll be my first Elebian Ascended pick, one of several. I can't really imagine him being legendary, so I'm going to say that he's more likely to be Ascended. Alright, so let's move on next to Blazing Blade. So for anyone who doesn't know, I am a huge Blazing Blade fan. It is not just my favorite Fire Emblem game, but my favorite video game of all time. So I had a really hard time narrowing down my list and reining myself in so that this didn't just become a video about why every single Blazing Blade character should get an Ascended or Legendary alt. So I did narrow it down to 5, which is still more than most of the other games are getting, but bear with me. So let's start with a really obvious one, which I think Ninian is almost guaranteed to be a legendary. She just fits the bill for what I see them looking for in a legendary hero really well. She is a pretty popular character. She is not quite a canon love interest of Eliwood, but kind of canon adjacent, I would say. She's very, very important in the story. I think she just kind of has everything going for her that they would want in a legendary hero. Next, the next most obvious character, I would say, is Nino. Nino, I feel, is the most obvious pick from Blazing Blade to be Ascended, but I can also almost see her being legendary if I squint, just because of how important she is in the story and how incredibly popular she is. So I'm actually going to put her in the Ascended camp, but very, very close to the legendary camp. Now, I absolutely love Nino, and she's one of my favorite characters from Blazing Blade, but I would really rather her not be an Ascended hero for Blazing Blade, just because she already has a few things, and there are so many characters from that game who I think really deserve a lot more attention than they've gotten. So I'd rather her come out as a legendary, because I think there's a lot of characters from Blazing Blade who could be Ascended, but are definitely less likely to be legendary. Even so, I still think it's more likely that she'll be Ascended, so I'm going to put her in the Ascended camp. Next up we have Florina, who I think is a very likely candidate to be an Ascended hero from Blazing Blade, so I'm going to put her right there. She's popular, she is closely associated with Lyn, and I think just that on its own is enough to almost justify her getting an Ascended alt. She's only gotten kind of 2 things in the game so far. She just recently got her Resplendent, and she also has a ninja duo with Lyn. So I could see her being a strong candidate to get Ascended, just so that she gets something else. And I definitely think she'd be a good pick. I think she would be a very good pick. Up next, I don't know how likely this one is, but I think it would be a great choice. It would make a lot of people very happy. And that is Rebecca. She's a well-liked character from Blazing Blade. A lot of people have been calling for her to get a Resplendent alt for, years now. And she hasn't gotten anything else, so I think she would be a good pick too. But then, of course, my number 1 pick personally from Blazing Blade to get an Ascended alt would 100% be this boy here, Matthew. He is my favorite character in the whole series. He has yet to get anything, and he definitely deserves some stuff because he's great and wonderful, so I'm going to put him over in the Ascended camp. I can't imagine him being legendary, but I think he really would be a great choice to be an Ascended hero. Matthew is a pretty popular, pretty well-liked character from Blazing Blade. He has been in Heroes since the very beginning. He's been a free hero that everybody has in their barracks since the moment they start the game. And he hasn't gotten anything yet. He hasn't gotten a Resplendent. He hasn't gotten any kind of alt. So having him be an Ascended hero, I think, would be fantastic. I would be over the moon. I would spend as many orbs as I had to get him to plus 10. The only reason why I might prefer for him to get a seasonal alt instead of an Ascended alt is that if he's a seasonal alt, it could be potentially a duo with Layla, or they could get an alt together. So they could each get a separate seasonal alt, but on the same banner. Either of those I would love. That would make me so happy. Where if he's an Ascended hero, then it's very unlikely that Layla would be involved in it at all. But either way, I would absolutely love it. I would be so happy. I'd be so excited. Please, IS. He's a good boy. He just deserves a little bit more attention, a little bit more love. So, please, IS, if anyone from IS is listening, either seasonal or Ascended Matthew, please, I'm begging you. Thank you for it. If it does eventually happen, thank you with all my heart. But anyway, that's, okay, side tangent over. Let's move on to Sacred Stones. So for Sacred Stones, let's start with, first, I think the most obvious, which I'm gonna say is Myrrh. I think Myrrh is almost definitely going to be a legendary hero. I feel like she kind of falls into a similar camp as characters like Tiki and Faye, who have already gotten legendary alts. So I think she is very, very likely to be a Sacred Stones legendary. As for some Sacred Stones characters who I think are more likely to get Ascended alts, the first one I'm going to say is a character who is long overdue from Sacred Stones who will get something, and that is Seth. He also is a character who doesn't have any kind of Resplendent, doesn't have an alt, and he's, one of the best characters in the game, one of the strongest units in the game, so he's very deserving of it, and I could definitely see him being an Ascended hero from Sacred Stones. So we'll put him there. I actually put him a little bit closer to the middle, because he's important enough to the story that I could still almost see him getting a legendary instead, but I definitely lean pretty hard into Ascended for him. Next up is Marissa. I'm going to put her in the Ascended camp. She kind of feels like she falls in the same category as Joshua, where she's a popular character from the game, and she was released initially as a Grail unit instead of being in the summoning pool. And then also she has one alt already, so it just feels like there's a lot of parallels there. It feels like a similar kind of setup. They're both popular characters. I could definitely see her being Ascended, so I'm going to put her in the strongly leaning Ascended camp. And then my last pick for Sacred Stones is a personal favorite of mine, and that is, of course, Florina. I think she'd be a great choice for an Ascended alt, just because even though she has 2 alts already, we still don't have a version of her that uses the Latona staff, which is one of the legendary weapons from Roston, where she comes from. So we do have a staff-wielding Florina, but she doesn't use Latona, so I think that would be a great opportunity to make her Ascended and then give her the Latona staff at last. It could also be a good opportunity for them to finally introduce Dazla into the regular summoning pool too. Next we have Talias. I'm going to put Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn together since there's obviously a lot of overlap between the 2 casts. So let's start with the character who I think this character is almost definitely going to be an upcoming legendary, and that is Elincia. Just being a major character, just between her important role in the story, her status as being almost kind of a lord herself, especially in Radiant Dawn, to me all of that signifies that she's more of a fit for being a legendary hero rather than an Ascended hero. I just think it's a better fit for her overall. Then after that I have a whole bunch of characters who I think are likely to be Ascended picks, so I'll try to go through them somewhat quickly because there's a lot. First we have Seth, being obviously an important character in the Radiant Dawn game especially, and being a close friend of Micaiah's. I think that definitely warrants him to get some kind of Ascended alt. He has gotten a couple things so far. He has a duo alongside Micaiah, and he has a Resplendent, but I could still easily see him being a pick for something like an Ascended, especially for Radiant Dawn specifically. Then we have the ever-popular Sorin. Just on popularity alone, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets in. I could even see him possibly being legendary, so I'm going to put him over here instead. I lean a little bit more Ascended with him, but his strong association with Wind, just like Merrick and Lewin, means I can see him easily being a Wind legendary. But I also think he'd be a really good choice for an Ascended hero, and definitely a really popular choice too. Next, we have Mist. I'm actually going to put her right in the middle. Being Ike's sister makes her, to me, seem story important enough that she could almost be a legendary base just on that. She's also canonically one of the only people in the world of Talias who can hold the Fire Emblem without going berserk. So that seems to make her pretty important from a lore perspective. So I could almost see them making her legendary based on that. Primarily a popularity choice, and she isn't that much, since her role in the plot isn't as significant as some of these other characters, but Mia is such a fan favorite that I could definitely see her coming out as an Ascended, kind of in the same camp as like Merida or Ira, just a very popular sword-wielding character, and one that I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see get an Ascended alt. Next we have Titania, as kind of the mother figure of the Grail Mercenaries. I think she's a pretty important character in the Talias cast, especially in Path of Radiance, and I think that could easily warrant her being ascended. And then finally, my top pick, by far, to get an ascended alt is my boy Ronolf, my absolute favorite character from Talias. I would love to see this for him. I think it's a great fit for him. He really needs a little bit more attention. He deserves some more love. He is one of the most popular beast units in the whole series, but he doesn't have an alt yet of any kind, and he really deserves a little bit more respect. So I think he would be an awesome choice for an ascended hero, especially since there's not that many characters who are beast units, so I think would be a good fit for one. So I'm really hoping that he will end up being ascended. If not, then IS definitely owes me a New Year's Ronolf. Now, I am clearly starting to run out of space on my ascended side of my little chart here, but that's okay. We're just going to try to squeeze characters in where we can fit them. So sorry if it starts getting a little bit more disorganized. With that, let's move on to Awakening. I really tried to narrow down the number of characters I had picked out for Awakening, but it was very difficult. So I ended up with 6 characters for Awakening, because there's so many that I really feel are likely or strong contending or very deserving candidates for an Ascended alt. So let's start with the only character on my list who I could pretty easily see being legendary, though I could also see Ascended, so I'm going to put her kind of here. I'm going to put her right here, where she could kind of easily fall into either category, though I do lean legendary for Alyssa. Being the main character's brother, and having a somewhat important role in the story, having the Exalted Bloodline, all of that I think could easily justify her getting legendary alt. So I'm going to put her right there. Now for, I think, the 2 most obvious contenders for Ascended alts, just based on popularity alone and the fact that they've already gotten a lot in the game. That being Cordelia, being the first of those. She's already gotten quite a few things in the game. She's just very popular, and I could definitely see her getting an Ascended alt as well. And then the other one who falls in that category, of course, being Darja. Regardless of how you feel about Darja, she is definitely a very popular character from Awakening, and I can easily see her getting an Ascended alt. Then I have a few characters who have gotten, like, basically nothing in the game, and it's very surprising to me, considering how popular these characters are. So the first is going to be Donal. He's such a popular character. I believe he finished in the top 10 in the first year of Choose Your Legends. So I'm just shocked he hasn't gotten anything yet. I think he has dropped down since then, but I just feel like it's really surprising that they haven't done anything with him. No Resplendent, no alts, nothing. So I'm going to put him over there as being a really great contender for Ascended, especially since it kind of fits his character, being someone who starts out as just a villager, and then you have to train him up and he has to, like, grow in order to join your army and stay there. So I think that's a really good fit for him. Next, a very popular character from Awakening, and one that I'm stunned hasn't gotten an alt yet, and that is Shersh. She is such a popular character. She has a really pretty visual design, so I'm just very surprised that IS hasn't tried to make an alt of her of some kind yet. So I could see her fitting as an Ascended pretty well. I think a seasonal alt is probably still a little bit more likely for her, but who knows, maybe they haven't given her a seasonal because they've been saving her for an Ascended alt. I don't know, just a guess. And then finally, while none of Crom's marriage options are truly canonical, a lot of people consider Sumia to be the closest thing to a canonical option for Crom. And I'm just very surprised with that in mind that she hasn't gotten any kind of alt yet. No alts, no Resplendent. So I could definitely see Ascended fitting her pretty well. So I'm going to put her in that camp as well. Let's move on to Fates. Now, when it comes to Fates, there really are just so many characters who could potentially be either Ascended or Legendary, seeing as there are, between all of the nobles, a lot of major characters who would really make sense for either. So I really made sure just to include a couple of the top contenders, just because it would be ridiculous to sit here and try to name all of the Fates characters who could possibly get Ascended or Legendary ults. It's a very big cast, and I didn't want to just turn this into nothing but a Fates video. So I picked a few who I think are strong contenders. The first one being a character who's almost definitely going to get a Legendary at some point, and that is Xander. I'm going to put him very, very strongly in the Legendary camp, seeing as Ryoma already has a Legendary, and Xander's kind of his parallel in Nor to Hoshido. So I would be very surprised if he doesn't get a Legendary alt. I could also see Xander's younger brother Leo easily getting a Legendary alt. He's also quite a popular character, and I'm very surprised he hasn't gotten more attention in the game. So I think Legendary is a good fit for him. I'm not really sure why I think Legendary rather than Ascended. Maybe because he comes with a Legendary weapon. Perhaps that's kind of what's making the difference for me in my head. But in any case, I definitely see him a little bit more leaning. I'll put him more in the middle because I think he's more inclined to go either way, but I think he could easily be Legendary. Next is Takumi. I'm going to put him around the same place that I'm going to put Leo, probably for a lot of the same reasons. He's super popular. He has gotten a lot of attention in the game, definitely more than Leo has. But he also has a Legendary weapon, and I just think that Legendary is a good fit for him. And then finally, the ever-popular Camilla. Once again, regardless of what you think about her, she is undeniably a super, super popular character. And I actually am going to lean more into the Ascended realm for her. Perhaps that's just because she doesn't have a Legendary weapon that's associated with her, but I think it's also because if she was going to be Legendary, I think her Legendary would probably be like a Queen Camilla, but we already have that in her Brave version. So with that in mind, I see hers being more likely to be Ascended. At least that's my reasoning, and you're obviously free to disagree with me. Moving on to Heroes itself, there's a handful of characters from Heroes who I think could definitely be contenders to become either Ascended or Legendary. I'm going to start out with Veronica, who personally I think she's more likely to be Legendary than Ascended. I don't really know why, I just kind of get that feeling from her. So I'm going to put her in this camp, but kind of close to the middle because I could go either way. And then the other two, of course, are our protagonists, our two main protagonists, Alphonse and his younger sister, Florina. I think either of them could go either way. I think I also lean a little bit more Legendary with them, but a little closer to the center too, so they could easily be Ascended too. Finally, we come to Three Houses, which personally, I don't think Three Houses is going to get an Ascended hero just yet, seeing as there's still so many characters left from Three Houses who are waiting to receive their base versions in Heroes. So I don't think they really need to add an Ascended hero to the banner yet. I just feel like there's still so many characters from the cast who are yet to be represented. But when they do start getting Ascended alts, which I'm sure they will eventually, these are the characters I think are most likely to. Personally, I can kind of see it being something where they use the retainer characters for each of the three lords. So therefore, I think Hilda, Hubert, I'm gonna put Hubert up there just since I'm very much running out of space, and finally Dedue are all strong contenders to at some point get an Ascended alt based on their importance in the story, their relevance to each of the lords. I think it's fitting if each of the lords has a Legendary alt, which they all do, and then each of their retainers gets an Ascended alt. It would also give us a way to see their time-skipped versions. But maybe they'll do it based more on popularity, and we'll get other characters who are more popular than they are relevant. I don't know, we'll see. So we'll have to wait and see either way. But in any case, these are my top guesses for which characters are likely to receive Legendary or Ascended alts of those who, at the current point in the game, do not have either. Please let me know if you agree with my picks, or if you have different picks, or if you would put characters on a different side of the board. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so by all means, please share in the comments. I look forward to hearing from you. In any case, that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Gemini, out.